People who experience homelessness are among the most marginalised demographic in Australia. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, homelessness can have an adverse impact on a person's ability to access education and employment. According to the 2011 census recorded by the ABS, there were 1,450 homeless youth aged between 12 and 24 years old. The Office for the Youth reports that homeless young people are less likely to aspire to university or to pursue a career of their choice. The information provided by the ABS isn't exact, but an approximation. A more comprehensive report is being released in 2018 that will accurately capture more information about youth homelessness in Australia. Belinda Youth Shelter is a residential program providing accommodation services for young people aged between 15 and 17 years old. It is funded federally through the Department of Communities and Social Inclusion. It is an emergency accommodation service for youth experiencing transience and homelessness, and through intensive short-term intervention, the program works for and with young people in overcoming significant barriers that prevent transition in living successfully in the community. These barriers include, but are not limited to, substance and alcohol issues, mental health issues, employment and education. Young people that experience homelessness or who are at risk of homelessness are severely restricted in their ability to access the education system, which leads to considerable disruption to their learning development. Factors that compound this issue can include being pregnant or having children, lacking an income, lack of access to public transport, having insufficient food, and lack of access to books and equipment necessary to engage in schooling. This disruption in education can lead to a long-term hindrance of social development and learning. According to UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organisation, inclusive education requires governments to take responsibilities for and educate all children regardless of their needs. Through adequate support, all children, irrespective of their different needs, should be able to learn together in mainstream classrooms in their local communities. Young people experiencing homelessness or who are at risk of homelessness are marginalised within society and face difficulties in the classroom and the broader community through exclusion based on their circumstance. At Belinda Youth Shelter, advocacy and case management are used as tools to address this exclusion and reduce the educational deficit that the clients are categorised with. Educational deficit is defined through focusing on student inadequacies with the intent of fixing the problem. For the clients at Belinda and other sites around Metropolitan Adelaide, this is specific with their housing status and the associated issues that being homeless brings. The deficit model is individualised and tailored to meet a specific need, and through focusing attention on the deficit within the student's social context, the student will then be able to succeed academically. The deficit model is damaging to an individual or group as it creates negative and damaging labels that suggest there is something wrong that needs to be fixed. Prior to volunteering at Belinda Youth Shelter, I only had very limited exposure and experience with young people affected by homelessness and transience. The previous placements in which I undertook professional student development were both categorised as affluent areas, where the rates of homelessness and associated issues were quite low. Further, I did not have any contact with any student who was experiencing a crisis of homelessness during my placement. Only through my recent community volunteering was I able to gain an insight into the complexity of issues that surround a young person who is experiencing homelessness or transience, and might be affected by or exposed to physical and emotional abuse, domestic violence, depression or anxiety, unemployment and substance abuse. These additional issues that often present alongside homelessness can cause an increase in the young person's health and development, resulting in depression, mental health and behavioural issues. I met several young people during my volunteering at the Belinda Youth Shelter who presented to the Salvation Army with one or multiple issues as described above, either by self-referral or through another agency. The unifying factor present among all of the young people was their current housing situation. Through working with the clients and talking to them about some of the issues that impact their lives, a great number had previously experienced a number of the factors described above, and several were currently experiencing a crisis centred around these factors. I had a conversation with a young female who was homeless and had been residing at Belinda Shelter for a number of months now. Over the course of our conversation, it was apparent that many of the issues described above applied to her, and the young female was attending regular counselling and therapy, but was also attending a private high school on a full-time basis, of which she was paying the fees for herself with the majority of her welfare payments. The student credited the school's support and flexibility and the role of Belinda House in advocating for and assisting her in overcoming the many barriers she faced as the reasons she was achieving so well in her life domains. Further to this, the young person herself, the resilience she displays daily, and targeted intervention designed to address her specific needs are also critical in ensuring her continued success. The neoliberalism ideology in relation to education in Australia is the idea that education is linked with the growth of economy, and in recent years there has been a shift from public schooling to a rise in private education, which will stimulate the economy, necessary in the era of globalisation. This ideology promotes privatisation, liberalisation, and the policies of deregulation. This ideological shift, one that families are increasingly choosing, suggests that education is unequal, and rather than an education for all approach, as was recommended in the Gonski Review, education is becoming more of a noticeable gap between wealthy and poor Australians, with a reduction of the social welfare state. The current federal government said in 2013 that Australia is a high equity nation in terms of our students, and there was no equity problem in Australia. This rationale given by the federal government would seem the exception rather than the rule. The young person I previously discussed has made many concessions and sacrifices to continue paying her tuition to a private school, and all other current residents of Bulindi and the overwhelming majority of prior residents that have resided at Bulindi have accessed public education either through technical college, local public schooling or TAFE, as there are many barriers that prevent these students from accessing private education. This suggests that the government's pledge to neoliberalism is not equal for all, and barriers that disenfranchised young people in Australia face are barred from having the same opportunity as those who do not have complex issues within their lives. The resilience and courage that this young female showed through conscious decisions that she made about her education and future was a testament to the appropriate targeted support the youth homeless sector gave. The school counselling and student guidance teachers through their positive relationship that they have built with the student, and the young person herself, who is thriving in her education and other areas of her life in spite of statistics and foregone conclusions that might have otherwise affected her in making different life choices. The young female spoke at length about the inclusivity that her school provided her, including flexible submission dates for assignments, additional assistance and support from teachers, additional use of Wi-Fi at the school, which is very important as the young people that access the shelter must budget for their own internet, but most importantly, understanding and empathy from the teachers for the student's situation. This internal self-efficacy and external influence have ultimately helped this young person thrive at schooling and give her further opportunities in any future studies and careers that she might decide to do. Normalisation is the principle that everyone is entitled to a lifestyle that others in society would regard as normal. In the case of normalisation in education, this is the right of the student and student's family to decide which school the student will attend, regardless of disability or other barrier. This shift of thinking began with legislation and policy that then led to changes in practice. In the case of young people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness, this principle has resulted in far greater opportunities for access to education, but also the support available to ensure successful inclusion through identifying barriers and overcoming them. Through discussions with the clients at Bulindi, I have seen this principle work in assisting each individual overcome some of the marginalisation that they face simply through being homeless. And whilst there is still much progress that needs to occur before true inclusivity is recognised, this normalisation has allowed these clients the opportunity to fulfil their educational needs. The young female from Bulindi described the school environment and teaching methods as very supportive, through rewarding positive learning experiences exhibited by the students and by encouragement, designed to build resilience among students to not give up if they did not succeed initially. This aligns with inclusive pedagogical beliefs as described on the screen. Through listening to the stories of the clients at Bulindi and reflecting on their individual needs holistically and in their education settings, I believe that they and others in their position would benefit from instructional pedagogical teaching, which is designed to explicitly build resilience in a student's learning and development. According to Schussler and Collins, 2006, learning environments that foster resilience are academic, supportive, and promote opportunities for success. This type of learning environment is quite similar to inclusive education. However, this pedagogical approach emphasises a caring, respectful, and supportive environment. The common thread I observed while at Bulindi was that each of the clients had incredible resilience to face and overcome the hardships they had already been challenged by. By emulating conditions that draw on these same qualities within the classroom would be of great benefit to the client. Class instruction that is student-centred and engaging, and students are involved in challenging lessons, will help develop new skills and learn to focus their attention. The students I have had the privilege to talk in depth to would thrive with learning that stimulates active participation, curiosity, and encourages thinking. And indeed, some of these themes were identified by the young female, who was thriving in the school environment due to these thoughtful and deliberate decisions made within the classroom setting. Through this community experience and volunteering, I have discovered meaningful connections between a young person's story, the theories and practices supporting her success, and the professionals and supportive network behind her, helping her to achieve inclusivity within the classroom. I believe that inclusion can only truly come about through critical and constant reflection of professional practice, embracing inclusive pedagogies, and challenging pre-existing ideas in the community and workplace that do not reflect these ideals.